Mm-hmm. Hello.
I told you.
Yes, I know. I'm ready now. Hello, everybody. I just have to keep clearing my throat with my seasonal allergy at the change of the season. Yes, welcome to Panoramic Perspectives. My name is Carl L. Johnson, and this, of course, is
Alicia Marco Wilson. First time I've been here in quite a while.
Yeah, I missed you for 2 weeks. People were starting to write in and ask about you.
I just had a lot going on, and you know what happens. You're busy too.
Yeah, I do keep busy. There's always something doing. I wish it were more profitable, but there's always something planned on the range.
You have a couple of things coming up. We can talk about those.
Well, the big thing, and I'm really looking forward to, is Ocean State Paracon on September 9th. And Saturday and Sunday, the 9th and 10th, you will be there. We'll have a table, and I'll be a speaker there. I'll probably pull you out of the audience. Come on.
You think it's going to be like 100 degrees? Even though it's going to be in September?
No, I think we're going to have it like kind of mild like it was today. So? I'm guessing. I don't mind.
September can be kind of funky. We shall see.
We can duck into the Assembly Theater and cool off because their air conditioning is really functioning. It gets cool in there, so you have your choice. So that's coming up again next weekend, Labor Day weekend. And this is Labor Day weekend. Heavens to Murgatroyd. Yeah, no, it's the weekend after that.
Next
weekend. Boy, that comes up fast.
Ocean State Paracon.
Yeah, the weekend following is Ocean State Paracon.
And then you've got a couple of things in October.
On September 29th, 30th, and October 1st, I will be in New Orleans, Louisiana for Fear Fest.
Yum.
Yeah. Kind of looking forward to that. The travel works and everything. That'll be good. Yeah, so that's for 3 days. And then at the end of October, October 28th, it's one day, Warren Seekers of the Supernatural will be happening at Mohegan Sun in Ledyard, Connecticut. So, yeah, I don't know if you will be with me for all of that. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, a couple of those are Johnson Brothers productions.
Yes, they're Johnson Brothers. That doesn't mean you're extraneous.
Is that the twins?
Yeah. It's just that they wonder who you're standing with. You're between us.
Twins?
Yeah, the twins. You guys. Now you're Carl. You're Keith.
And you both went to your high school reunion.
Oh, if you want to get a little personal background. Well, this, I think this makes 3 weeks ago. Is it tonight or tomorrow night? It makes 3 weeks. That was, I almost didn't go, high school reunion. That might be the last one. I don't know. What a good experience. I'm so darn glad my brother, was the impetus for us both going. We showed up that we were each other's dates, and some people instantly recognizable, like myself. And it was just such a shock and a nice surprise to see some people. And it was a full house. I thought it would be sparse. No, a lot of people there. And some of the guys, though, have like gray or white beards. And I recognize the eyes. They look familiar, but I'm not sure who that is.
What am I doing here with all these old people, huh?
Yeah, and of course, they're people have name tags. So I'm like, yeah. Yeah, some people just don't seem to change much. So that was really fun. Had nothing to do with the paranormal, except I gave out a panoramic cards, panoramic paranormal cards. I gave out about 40 of those to people.
Well, that's nice.
Oh, I got something in my house. Yeah.
Yeah, and yes. So we've had a couple of little things going on. No real investigations, but we had one that was kind of interesting. I don't usually go into places looking for things that nobody has reported. Just because a building's old doesn't mean it's haunted. We all know that. But we had some friends who told us they were interested in learning a little bit more about paranormal investigating. So I thought, I could tell them to read a book or we could take them out. So we brought them to a building that is now a business that had been a house in the 1800s.
Right.
I just happened to know, and I did a little bit more research, and a woman had died in the house when it burned down. And then years later, when it was the business, a man had hanged himself in there. I had newspaper articles verifying both. So I showed them how to, and I wasn't, I tried to.
So 2 confirmed deaths there.
2 confirmed deaths, and we weren't looking to dredge anything up. But, it was a really great location. We could show them how we actually do these kinds of things. Yeah. That we're not just, walking around in the dark with all the lights off looking for a jump scare, because we would have just been banging into each other. And
they had wonderful experiences. They really liked it. And,
so it's fun to teach somebody who really wanted to.
Yeah, and they got to see we're fun, but we have the serious side too. And you led that investigation. I would say you led that because you. I
really wouldn't call it an investigation, but I showed them how an investigation.
Yeah, there was more a demonstration.
A demonstration. That's a good.
And for our demonstration, we got some results. Though.
Yeah, that was fun.
We did. More about that later. Anyway, our guest. Oh no, come on.
Oh no.
I want to hear what you say.
I was just going to say I've started working on a project with some people I met at the Rhine Center, which I highly encourage you to just get in touch with people who are interested in the same things that you are and collaborate. He was looking for someone to put together some data. He's an author that's written a book on ghost hunting and has a whole bunch of, one of those people that does those research papers that I used to only read the abstracts. Now I've learned how to read the papers. And now I'm actually going to get to be in on the bottom floor, on the ground floor of gathering together all this data from what they like to call citizen scientists, people who are, learning how to gather information in more of a, I can't even think of the word right now. I'm so tired. A manner that it can be collaborated and you take the averages of what information was gathered and compare it to other groups and come out with some kind of answers.
Basically a study in corroboration.
I did a terrible job of explaining that, but
no,
maybe one of these days, as it gets a little bit more underway, we'll have one of those people on from that group to explain exactly what they do.
You are really collating. You're looking for like commonalities in it, and yeah, it's fascinating work though, just because you get to read what the experience is.
Yeah, it's actually, when people say they use the scientific method, these are actual scientists and they're coming up with theories and applying, going through their data and seeing if it worked. And if not, come up with a new theory.
Oh, you're the reconciling department.
Yeah, I'm doing a little bit of
pretty much
work.
Yeah,
so
and if anybody thinks that you probably wouldn't be listening to our show if you felt this way, but some people do take a stance that, it's a waste of time. You can't really call that a school. It's not really a study. It's not science. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Just because it may not be embraced by standard academia doesn't mean it isn't a serious study. It really is. It's exploring some of the most profound mysteries of nature and of life and death. So it's certainly worthwhile studying. Anyway, our guest, what can we say about him? This is a return guest, and we're very happy to have him back. It's actually by popular demand. This is Mr., I'll say it first, Levi Lionel Leland, LLC.
No, it's LLL.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Hi, Levi.
There
Hi, guys. Thank you for the
Yeah. Well, I just rattled it off. Yeah. Hello. Good to see you back. Welcome back, my friend. You really are back.
Having me back.
I had so much positive feedback from your guest spot before, or guest hour, and people liked it because it's a departure from this, the ghosties and spirit. Well, actually, tonight does have something to do with spirit communication.
Yes.
It's more going on exploring a personality than the actual, function of communicating with spirits. How did they used to communicate with spirits, say 150 years ago? You didn't have all this. Well, we don't have grand technology now to do it. We have a little more sophistication. We have recordings and all that. But how would they go about that 150 years ago? How would somebody try to get in touch with a ghostie?
So, of course, I guess you would do what sounds like the most sensible thing to do, and you just try to talk to them, right?
Yeah.
And so we know the whole seance craze started with the Fox sisters in Rochester, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so they pretty much convinced the world that they could communicate with the dead, essentially through means of seances. And so they would gather and, they would have a couple people around a table. It would be dark. Usually there would be someone leading the seance, a medium, a confirmed medium. And yeah, they would just try to communicate with the dead. But it kind of started to get a little hokey because people were questioning it. And it later came to be known that, well, for example, the Fox sisters were using little tricks to convince guests of the seance that they were actually communicating with the dead. So rappings would be them actually cracking their knuckles or their toes and, things like that. There would be little, like, I don't know, we could equate it today to like a magician. Obviously we know that magic isn't real per se, but the illusion is. And I think what these sisters were trying to do was kind of create this illusion that there could be this access to the dead. And of course, Victorian people being Victorian people, Oh, they were right on board with this, right? Because Victorians were so death obsessed that they were like, "Oh, we can talk with our deceased loved ones. Great, this is awesome." So they took it, they received it with open arms, and then from there it just became
Right. And
a
even here on this
wild
side of
craze.
the pond, as they say, there was so much death associated with the Civil War that, people were sent off to war and never came home.
Mm-hmm.
People, is not all of them had their bodies transported back. Some of them are still buried down there in Gettysburg. Everybody has a big
Right.
part. And so the illusion that you could communicate with this person one more time was, just so.
It was hopeful.
It was very hopeful, and people would pay a medium all kinds of money for that opportunity.
Right. There kind of became a monetary value to it. And then, of course, it just snowballed from there. And people all over the country were starting to practice this.
Bereavement and hope are marketable, especially in time of war.
Right. And we can even kind of, it still relates today when we think about the culture of death. I mean, there are cultures all over the world that take care of their deceased loved ones. They prepare the body. They lay the body out. They bury the body. They spend time with the body. Nowadays, well, at least in America, we kind of dissociated from that. We let someone else take care of it. And now there's almost this stigma like, oh, once it's a dead body, we can't touch it. We can't do anything with it. We can't move it. We got to call somebody. And that's not actually the case. I mean, if it's your loved one, you have every right to that loved one's remains, and people don't really get that. So we pay somebody else. We pay a business to take care of it.
Yeah, and people grow up never having seen a dead person, never mind touching them. Oh my goodness. And so there's just such an aura of mystery around dead people.
Yes. But suddenly the person is gone. Is there anything left of them? Is there any mind with which to communicate? Things are quite different in Indonesia. Once a year, they party. They bring out their deceased. And when I say bring them out, they exhume them, change their clothes, actually have socializing with the family gatherings, and they're smiling, happy with it. That's their culture. It seems very macabre to us.
Right. And it's all very natural to them. It makes sense to them. So
the mortuary photos from the 19th century, though, and some of the, they would have the deceased posed with them, especially if they did not have a photograph taken in life, photo portrait. And some of them, they go beyond macabre to bizarre by our reckoning, by our standards. That relative should have been interred some time before.
Right. We've progressed in so many ways, but then not in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right. So
especially with death.
Natural.
We are still asking the questions that we asked 150 years ago about like life after death and communication and all that. Some people feel they have it figured out. Other people just aren't interested. But other people think it's wrong to even go there and explore it. But those questions are still out there.
Yeah.
Being asked.
And so in talking about death and the Victorians with the death obsessed kind of culture, the seance craze just was rampant. I mean, people wanted to communicate with the dead and their loved ones, and so we have this character, right, in Providence, Sarah Helen Whitman, who's kind of like a leading medium, we'll say, in Providence. She attends the very first recorded seance, I should say, in Providence in September of 1850. So she deemed it not successful, by the way. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Want to believe that they would just assume, oh, I felt the presence, but she was actually discriminating about that. So the Fox sisters were like 1841 and 1842. They came into prominence. We're talking a little later.
Yeah, now we're talking towards the 1850s. I think the Fox sister craze they were doing things at their house and their parents were kind of also victims to their tricks, and I think the two younger sisters were kind of convincing the older sister that they could communicate with the dead utilizing all these tricks. And so then the older sister started like marketing them. But they started to really become a thing in 1848. I think that was right around the time it was really starting to pick up. And then by 1850, Providence was kind of joining in on the craze, and they were hosting their own seances. And of course, Sarah Helen Whitman was right at the forefront of that. And now, so for people that might not know Sarah Helen Whitman too much, it's easier to tell people what she wasn't. I mean, she dabbled in everything. She was an activist. She was part of the feminist movement. She was, transcendentalist. She was, of course, a spiritualist, which is why we're talking about her today. She rallied behind animal rights, African-American rights, so many different things. She was such a leader. She was such like a beacon of light that kind of led a culture and a society to better views, and then also like different views, different perspectives. And she was always described as kind of flighty and a little, she would float around Providence and so deep in thought that her veil or her shawl would kind of blow off in the wind and she wouldn't even know it. And then her friends would find it in the street and know exactly who it belonged to and then return it to her later at her house. So she's kind of described as this, very absent-minded person, but she was very, very intelligent and she was with it. So now she's dabbling in the spiritualism movement, but I think part of her was skeptical.
Unusual.
That's what I've taken from it. From what I've read, because everything I've read that had to do with her and spiritualism, and there's not a lot out there. It's elusive. We don't get a lot of successful accounts from her that she made contact with the spirit, that this and that happened. They saw an apparition, or there was communication, there was contact. We don't get a lot of that with her, but we get some funny, interesting anecdotal things that I can also share with you, but I don't want to just jump everything all at once.
Now, she was, of course, in that era, she would have been photographed. There are several photographs of Sarah Helen Whitman.
Yes.
Portrait photography began in around 1840. I think the first actual clear portrait of a person was in 1839. And it's very clear.
And I actually found a nice picture of her at a seance.
At a seance.
Let me see if I can show this. Yeah, we can see each other.
This is a very interesting photo. Probably one of my favorites because it exhibits her more eccentric side, I guess. You very seldom. Yeah, right. Very seldom do you see photos of people with sack over their face, essentially. Yeah. But this photograph was taken around 1856, roughly. It's undated, but it's 1856 or a little later. Her friend William Coleman took this photograph, and he took a number of other photographs of her. And today it's in the collection of Brown University at the John Hay Library. She actually had pasted this photo along with another photo that Coleman had taken of her in her first edition of poetry, Hours of Life, 1853. She pasted it in that book and gifted. That's the other one. Yep. So you can see her face in that one.
Yeah, that's a nice picture.
Yeah, it's a flattering portrait. She was definitely an interesting woman. It shows her, certainly her intelligence, her dignified kind of manner. So she pasted those photos into an edition of her poetry and gifted it to Coleman shortly before her death, like 10 days before her death.
Really?
Yeah, and so now the a lot of her belongings and her effects, even the ones that she gifted, ended up at Brown University for preservation purposes. So, but going back to that first photo where she's in that seance attire. So
looks like she's in drapery.
Yeah. Yeah, she's layered up. She's essentially reading a manuscript through the spirits. That's essentially what she's doing in this photo. So
Okay, I
she's
see.
veiled. She has the veil over her head so she can't see, but you can almost see through the veil a little bit, and you can see where at the left edge, right before that shadow kind of comes down, you see the outline of her nose and her left eye that's closed. And so she's kind of bowed down, and she's got the manuscript to her head. And this was her attempt to read the manuscript through the spirits. So the spirits essentially read the manuscript and relay what it says to her, you know. So this was a practice that and now I couldn't find a lot about mediums and different people who practice spiritualism trying to gain things from manuscripts particularly.
Yeah.
But Sarah Helen Whitman did. And there's an interesting story that I'll share. So she had hired a medium, a professional medium. So, and this was relayed in her correspondence to John Ingram, an early Poe biographer. She gifted a professional medium a manuscript, the original, to Helen, the poem that Poe had written to her in 1848, in his handwriting. I mean, this was valuable, not only just, you know, money valuable, but just for the sake of Poe and the materials that belonged to him. I mean, this was highly valuable. She gifted it to this professional medium to have him study it and see what he could gain from the spirits from the manuscript. And he ended up losing it, and it's been gone ever since.
Oh, wow.
And that was Poe's original manuscript of To Helen, the poem that he had written for her.
Oh,
so, and she was really bummed out about this, you know, because not only did this medium come back with no information about what he gained from it, you know, spiritually, but he physically didn't have it. So she was distraught by this. But I often find in researching her that she's seeking out the help of other mediums, professional mediums, which kind of leads me to believe that she didn't consider herself a professional medium, a serious medium. She was just kind of like dabbling in it and just kind of trialing it for herself.
Yeah.
You know, and so I get this kind of gray area where, yes, she was behind the spiritualism movement and she was for this method of contacting the dead. I think she was hopeful that it was a legitimate thing, but at the same time, I think she saw the hokiness in it and how some, or I should say most of the mediums at the time were kind of just playing tricks to get people to buy it and then pay them for the show, for the hope.
Entertainment.
So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
But
now when you look into her spiritualist activities and the people she was contacting, did you ever come across Joseph Pierce Hazard as being in contact with her? He was from like South Kingstown. He was of the same era.
So that sounds familiar. Hazard. I think she was he was probably one of her contacts. I can recall her either talking about him or at least mentioning him in her correspondence. That name sounds very familiar, but I haven't found too much else beyond that. But it's
at Rhode Island College. It's online if you ever want to look at it.
Okay, I'll definitely look that up.
Druid's Dream ring a bell because that was his creation. Druid's Dream was on his property. I've been there. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that might seem more familiar too. But you know, of course, he was a spiritualist, but different. He was not a medium. Well, he received. I don't think
he wrote a lot.
Yeah,
he wrote a lot of instruction books on how to hold seances and what to do.
Okay.
And some stuff's on the Internet Archive also.
I don't know. Did he refer to himself as a medium? I don't.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yes.
Yeah. He was a medium.
Yeah, and I find that Sarah Helen Whitman too, kind of like Hazard, wrote a lot about it, and kind of had a lot of information about it. But again, it's vague as to whether or not she had experiences herself and could. There's one little essay that she wrote about spiritualists going on a picnic, and so apparently there was this picnic of some 300 people up in, I think it was Flushing, New York. So 3 steamboats took these spiritualists to a picnic in Flushing, New York, and so she was on the second steamer, and so the first group had arrived, they were settling in, and so her steamer had arrived, and so she was starting to settle in, and she said there was no spiritual activity until the third steamer came in. And so apparently when this group of spiritualists got off the boat, one of the coach horses or something had taken off with its tail between its legs. And so she said this undoubtedly was the cause of a spirit, because she referenced the poem by Tam O'Shanter. I think the title Tam O'Shanter by Robert Burns. That's who wrote the poem.
Okay, Robert Burns.
And in the poem, it's a long poem, but it's kind of it's not really supposed to be taken too seriously, but a witch takes the horse's tail in the poem, whatever. And so she said this horse had taken off with its tail tucked right underneath it. So it must have been a spirit. So it's just funny how she's referencing these things, but she's still kind of being lighthearted about it. It's almost like there's some, I don't want to say sarcasm, but she's kind of playing into the whole spiritualism thing, and kind of
realizing
writing things to be taken lightly, you know?
Realizing that the rest of them are all primed to just have something happen, anything.
Right.
There it is.
Well, Mrs. Whitman was not, I would not consider her grim. She's not somebody who took herself too seriously, you know.
Exactly.
Where, you know, this is somber. The spirits will not respond unless you know, unless you are somber, and we mourn them, but we want them back. You know, that wasn't her.
Right. Yeah. She still kept a very intelligent, well put together persona about her, even though she was, you know, losing her shawls in the street. She was still. People looked to her in the city. I mean, she was a tutor. She tutored students at Brown University. John Hay, the guy who became private secretary to Abraham Lincoln, and the library is named after him, the Brown Library, John Hay. She tutored him when he was a young man studying at Brown. So, you know, and he became successful. Not only was he worked in the government, worked with Abraham Lincoln, but he was a writer, a poet, an author. So people kind of looked to her as this outlet for information. And I think people kind of relied on her input on some of these new things that were kind of sweeping the nation, like spiritualism. So because it was a brand new thing. And so, of course, the Victorian people were like, you know, what is this? They were curious about it, but I'm sure a lot of them were afraid of it. And a lot of them probably thought it was, you know, against God and all this other stuff. And so I think a lot of Providence people look to Whitman to kind of help them sort it out for themselves and to get like a well-educated opinion on the subject. So I think she felt no other choice but to study it herself and dabble in it and see what it was about. And, you know, she did her best to, you know, translate the study as, you know, realistically as she could, but knowing that there were people still hopeful that it was a real thing. So she didn't want to totally, you know, debunk it, you know, but she wasn't exaggerating and saying, oh yeah, you know, I saw Poe standing right in front of me and he told me this. And we don't have those kind of things from her, those kinds of stories. So, you know, it's hard to say.
I'm hearing them now from people. You know?
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, like he appeared to me, he said to carry on his work. Or, you know, she said, you know, my mission on earth should be, you know, you still do hear that. People are people. And there was a dichotomy extant in the mid to later 19th century in Providence, Rhode Island, because you had the throes of the industrial age, you know, and people, there was a materialistic climate, but there was also that old world, that mysticism, that inclusiveness that Providence had, you know, welcome the people with different beliefs, the outcasts, you might say. So there was an ideal time for her as well. I would have liked to have known her.
Yeah, I say that a lot. I think she would have been a fun lady to have a conversation with.
Oh yeah.
I wonder if she's been called upon in a seance. Most likely, yeah.
That she'd be a good one to reach out to. I feel like she would try her best to communicate.
Answer, yes.
Yeah.
That would be great. Imagine.
Then again, a seance they could produce Mrs. Whitman if people are sincere enough and really want to hear from her. They could believe that they'd gotten through to her. So it's
Yeah, around Halloween time, all you hear is Poe, 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 and you never hear Whitman when everybody's talking about spooky things.
You have a tour, a very engaging tour in Providence, the east side of Providence, and you walk through Poe territory and Mrs. Whitman's neighborhood.
Yes, 100%. The tour is, of course, Poe's Providence, because that's probably the more interesting component of the tour. And thank you for sharing the link. We trace the sites, of course, that are associated with Poe, but they're associated with Whitman because Poe is here because of Whitman. He was courting Whitman and engaged to her. So she was the reason why he was here for as long as he was and visited as many times as he did. So the tour does highlight the courtship, and it does highlight Poe, of course, and his time in Providence, but it also highlights Sarah Helen Whitman in her own right, and I talk about, her successes and her endeavors as an individual, because she was so amazing as a person outside of her relationship to Poe. But today we really only know her as, oh, that was Poe's girlfriend. I hear that all the time. Oh, yeah, Poe had a girlfriend in Providence. Well, yeah, Sarah Helen Whitman, but she did so many other things than that, So the tour is a good balance of Poe, because Poe is what attracts the audience, 100%. But we're also talking about Whitman. We're celebrating her. We're highlighting her life in Providence, her achievements. And then, of course, we're talking about the courtship. And we're literally tracing their footsteps through these sites that they courted and spent time at. And the tour is pretty neat because I've written it as a story. It tells the factual history in chronological order from the site. So beginning to end, we start where it started and we end where it ended. And through the tour, we talk about every site that, they were associated with, and the events that transpired during that courtship. And so I urge people to take it if they're interested in learning anything more about Sarah Helen Whitman or Poe in Providence. Of course, my website's there. My tour season is happening now, actually. So next month, I have a few dates. October, there's a load of dates. And then November, there's a couple more dates to finish it off. It tends to get kind of chilly towards the end of November. So we kind of call it quits then.
Draw it in, yeah. Yes. But there's so much information. So much information on the tour. And I thought it was superb because you created a narrative. It's one thing to just, disseminate information. This happened here and that and when, but to make it actually a kind of a strange love story, weaving together.
Yeah, that's what I've learned with a lot when it comes to Poe. The truth is stranger than any fiction you can create. So you can tell the narrative as true as it is, and it's so fascinating as long as you do it in kind of an engaging way. And so, unlike a regular walking tour where it's like, okay, you stop at this site and, here's the building, here's who lived here, here's what happened, and then you move on to the next one and here's this building here. You're getting the history of the sites themselves and what happened there, but it's also telling, like you said, Carl, the narrative in chronological order of this whole romance. And people are like gripped. I've had one person tell me they were like, oh, it was like a Netflix show. Like each stop was an episode. And I just I just wanted to binge watch it. I wanted to find out what was going to happen next, Well,
I think it was to your credit. I think it's genius the way you put that together and make it, it could go either way. It could be a kind of a dry walking history lesson, or it could be engaging, and it could be something that draws people in. That these are people, these are emotions. Yeah. I have heard people. There are always laughs. Well, Elise got a big laugh. I forgot what she said one time when she was on it. But there's always laughter at certain points, and I've seen people with tears. I've seen people, like dabbing their eyes because there's so poignant. and there's just a little element of spooky and horror in it, and it just sum it up as fun.
Right.
I'm
Well,
going
thank
back.
you. Definitely come back. You're welcome anytime.
I should do that again.
Yeah, and it changes, it varies. I try to switch up some little details here and there that I find are, worth sharing. Sometimes I think, oh, I'm not going to share this because it's unnecessary. Let me just condense this. And then other times I'm like, no, I'm going to share this because I think it is worth noting. So you kind of get a little bit more depending on when you go, or what mood I'm in.
On the tour, I've noticed that because someone will bring something up and you'll say, "Oh, I know about that," and it wasn't something you were thinking of speaking about that day. Just you got to cut it somewhere. But since you brought it up. So
you nailed it. You nailed it. Yeah, it can
more interesting.
Exactly.
Really now, hopefully, one of these days, somebody's going to say, I've got this aunt. She's got like this old paper, and it has Edgar Allan Poe's name on it. And it's going to be the poem that he lost.
Right. You know what? I'm waiting for that day to come. I hope it does.
It's good.
And then you tell that person, "Don't go."
That's why
don't go yet.
Find things in the darndest places.
Oh yeah, and there's Poe things. You go through history of certain things that involve Poe, like a lot of his photographs, the daguerreotypes that were taken of him. Right. They're gone today. They're lost. And we have record of them up until some of them, the 20th century, and then they disappeared. They were stolen or and those original photographs, which are essentially priceless. I mean, as you know, a daguerreotype was like a Polaroid. It was one shot.
I have a daguerreotype of Sarah.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Of her.
Yeah, it was probably a costume party. I think I read.
Unless she just always dressed like that.
Yeah, she was one to really layer up with the fabrics and the shawls and the headwear and the veils and the ribbons, and that was taken 1853.
Was really cool.
Not by Coleman. I think Joseph White, I want to say, that is another daguerreotypist in Providence. But
I just read a whole bunch of them, so I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
It was like a crash course.
She was an alluring, attractive woman. She has a mystical quality to her eyes. There's something. She's otherworldly. She's
and it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of her friends described her as exactly that. They said she had these eyes that seemed to gaze upon this world into other worlds. There was something, that's exactly the word they would use, otherworldly, about her. So I'm surprised that someone like her wasn't more successful in communicating with the dead, because it seemed like she naturally had this otherworldly kind of energy and aura about her that would, make contact with these other worlds. Right. So I'm so surprised that there wasn't more success stories, but she did claim that she successfully communicated with Poe, but she was very private about that. And I think she didn't want to be scrutinized for being ingenuine, or, I think, she was just really trying to get that closure for herself, because, as we know, the romance didn't end well. So, I think she did try to contact Poe's spirit, and she says she successfully did. So we can take her word for that.
Yes, we can only guess at her criteria for success in contacting him, but she must have had a reason to say that, since that famous 1851 seance in Providence, she said that was not successful. So apparently she's discriminating about her seances.
Yeah, she was definitely a honest reporter of things. I don't think she would say something was, we saw all these ghosts and we heard all sorts of things, if it genuinely didn't happen. And I think, if anything, she tried to mitigate the kind of craze about the whole movement by being a little bit more subdued about what was actually happening at these seance tables.
Right.
And what's interesting about you, Mr. Leland, is you still don't refer to yourself as an expert. So, I say you're a Poe scholar. You're the expert on Poe.
Right.
Well, I'm not expert. No, I'm scholar.
I'm just I struggle every time. I'm like, what do I call myself? Like some kind of nut that just is obsessed with Poe, and now Sarah Helen Whitman. I don't know. There's no piece of paper that says you're a scholar, I guess, until you publish something academic, and we all know how difficult that can be to get a paper out there. But I do have some things published. There's a couple books coming out actually that I've been a part of, and you guys can look out for the October issue of Rhode Island Monthly. There will be an interesting article in there about Poe and Whitman that I was interviewed for. So, and another little surprise that I can't share.
Okay, well,
you will see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you'll tell me in a private message,
right? So you don't have to worry.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to.
He's going Hollywood on us.
So what did Levi say? I can't share that. I don't get that nosy usually, but you have piqued my curiosity. I will remember that during your tours.
No, it's just so good when you can. When you have an interest and you find other people who share it, and you can introduce it to even more people who, just heard the names here and there.
Yeah.
But once they, take the tour or read the article, they'll be like, wow, I never really read a poem by Sarah Helen Whitman, or I never really read anything by Edgar Allan Poe. Just kind of heard about it.
What ideal place to be exposed to that, because that is a primer. You get the basics and information there.
Right. Yeah, and one thing I like to pride myself on about the tour is that which maybe isn't a good thing, but to me it is. It's not academic. It's not stuffy. It's not like, here I'm this unapproachable person that I'm going to dump all this information about Poe and Whitman on you, and you process it and you leave, go home. I try to make it fun. I try to make it conversational. I urge people, like, ask questions, make comments. Like, I'm telling the story, and I'm also. I've been so deep into Poe and Whitman studies for so long that I'm at least a reliable source of information, because I've read it all. I've seen it all. I've read it all. I've been through it all, and I've seen the fake information that's out there. I can sometimes even source it. Someone will say, "Oh, now I heard that Poe urinated in Whitman's fireplace before he took off when the engagement was broken off," and I'm like, "Oh, you did?" And they're like, "Yeah, and the police were called and this and that." And I'm like, "Well, that was just slander spread by Rufus Griswold, Poe's rival."
Oh yeah, his
biographer. Who can pinpoint that it's like, no, that's not accurate, So it's I can at least debunk those myths. Because I've just been doing it for so long now. It feels like forever, but I don't know, half my life. I think I was introduced to Poe when I was like 12, and now I'm 28, and I've literally I haven't stopped pursuing.
That is half your life then. Now, I wouldn't want to stand out in a crowd, but would this be over the top?
The Raven himself?
Yes.
You just need a chamber door and a bust of Athena, and then you're golden.
This is a persona. This is my muse. This is my shadow self in Jungian terms. So maybe sometime, because then if it's above 70 degrees, I'll wish I hadn't.
I thought of you one day, Levi, because I've been working at an antique store pricing items. And
okay.
So sometimes you open a box. It's like, ooh, what's in here? And I took out this little white head, and I put it down, and I'm just sitting there looking at her, and I'm like, it's a bust. So my friend's like, what is that? And I said, it could be a pallid bust of Pallas.
I was going to say, was it pallid? But you beat me to it. Yeah.
I've heard that. I'm like, yeah, Poe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Make up a card, pallid bust of Pallas.
It wasn't a nice one, though. It was just like resin or something. It wasn't, anything.
Yeah, you can find some nice Athena bust and all that with a helmet.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. There's so many Poe souvenirs out there now. He's kind of becoming like a pop culture icon in a weird way. If you notice, they print his face on anything now.
There are Poe
and underwear and shirts and bobbleheads and
bobbleheads. I was going to say, I've seen them. Big Poe had kind of a big head anyway, so he makes a good bobbler.
He sure did. Yeah, he does, because they don't even have to scale the head up and the body down. They just keep the proportions the same.
Yeah, it works.
I said that on one of my tours I gave, and he was one of my presentations a tribute to Edgar Allan Poe. I said he was. When it came to his forehead, he was very well endowed.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah. Now I have to also ask on your tours, because I've given I give to public presentations in Providence a year. One for Edgar Allan Poe, one for sometimes two for Poe, and one for Lovecraft. This time I gave 2 Lovecraft presentations. One was a very rainy April 23rd, where it's just like, let's see if any diehard show up, and we got a dozen people.
Oh, I'm sure. That's great. I mean, and you've been in the scene for so long with Poe and Lovecraft in Providence, celebrating them and bringing attention to their works and stuff with those events, which has been great. And I don't want to interrupt your story, but I will mention my first Poe event in Providence was Carl's when I was probably around 12 or 13 when I first got introduced to Poe. So, that was my first introduction to Poe in Providence and a gathering of other fans.
Oh, I remember that. That was a very cold day, and we did that along Riverwalk in Providence near the market building.
Yes, we did. Yep.
Oh my, that was something. We did have fun with that. So many strange things happened, and I kind of remember you there.
Yeah.
You were young guy.
Yeah, it was just a kiddo at that point. I mean, geez, it's.
Thank you. Oh, that's how we met.
But yeah, that was my first introduction. So that's I'm doing the tours now and everything, but it's been like this progression of just, meeting people and that are local and not local, in other states across the country and other countries across the world. I mean, there are Poe fans all over the place. So, you build this community, you connect, and you share your interest with these people, and that's how you learn and grow and network. And it's been amazing. So Carl's he was one of the OGs, as they would call it.
OGs, wow.
Yeah, I tend to get recognized. Have you had anything? You have interesting people sometimes, take you to. They're all great. Have you had anything that borderline supernatural or a little odd happen during? I'm driving at anything ghostly.
Right. I wish
at all.
I know, right? I wish I could say that I did. I think
well, say it.
That's a question I got to ask the guests at the end of the tour, because I think I'm so engrossed into the script and what I'm saying and pointing at and talking about that I'm not paying attention to what could be happening.
Wow.
But
somebody's going to that horse and carriage going down Benefit Street.
Right.
The ghostly horse and carriage.
Yeah, right. Or the black shadowy figure that's walking down Benefit Street, like hunched into themselves, and
the old graveyards were there before they moved them.
Yeah. And it's a strange time of year for me. I've lost two people who were very, very dear and close to me. Always in like the beginning of October. I mean, those especially those 2 times. It was my grandfather's birthday, October 16th. But I've lost, in fact, my mother on October 1st. This will be 4 years. And so it's always haunting. And around the time that we lost my mother, I gave an Edgar Allan Poe presentation. And of course, I wasn't going to cancel it. It's like, no, this is what I do. This is what my mother would want me to do. And we actually had a little departure in the program. We had a woman recite The Raven publicly, Edgar Allan Poe's signature poem, The Raven. Actually, that was, to my knowledge, the first time a woman publicly read that. And she did very well. She memorized. She does have a Providence or North Providence accent. What are you going to do? That doesn't mean, we don't know much about the narrator of The Raven, really. So we had a female do it, and that was quite fitting. And while she was reading, talking about strange things that happen, and something always happens weird at the H.P. Lovecraft tribute. Now, of course, I'm referring to Elise. Elise was not dressed up as Sarah Helen Whitman, but when she did wear her garb, her attire, I said, I see Sarah Helen Whitman here. And when Elise recited, she memorized it, but she had her notes just for reference. And she's reading, as she's reciting, this blackbird, you could tell with your program now what that was. It was, I don't know if it was a kestrel or something.
Your brother must have recorded it.
Yes, my brother records everything there. He's a cyborg. He records everything. A blackbird, it wasn't a crow. A blackbird winged overhead about 15 feet above her. And while she's right. And Elise just keeps talking. Elise looks up and, hey, while I nodded, nearly napping, she just didn't miss a beat. But she watched it fly over, and it's like, oh yeah, we meant that to happen.
Right.
That was like,
that's cool.
stuffed one we had brought.
No, yeah, the stuffed one, which would fall over, you know. But yeah, look for something like that, you know, if you're, because Edgar Allan Poe's ghost reportedly has been witnessed in front of the Athenaeum, the Providence Athenaeum Library. And we don't know if it was, but I like to think so. Some people.
A man with a hat. Let me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that fits right
All
in
men
there.
wear hats back then.
Right, man with a hat. Yeah.
Always makes me laugh. A man with a hat. He was probably outside.
Yeah, right. You don't. Well, you guys, as the professional investigators, I mean, you are the key people to ask about, you know, what's real and what's not. You must see all the time things that are quite real, and then things that people are just kind of wishful thinking in a way, if that's the right term to use.
Well,
So
of course there is, because it's such an attractive, you know, interest. You know,
right. Like everybody wants to see a ghost, but that doesn't mean they're going to see a ghost actually. Right. But they might convince themselves that something was supernatural when it could have just been very natural.
Patterns, just as people, we tend to see patterns in everything, and they'll stop picking up on coincidences. You know, you buy a red car, and all of a sudden you're like, "Wow, there's a million red cars on the street."
Right.
And, you know, one time you were watching TV and a shadow passed by your. You know, I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. Now, every time something moves in your house, you don't even think about, "Oh, I must have left the window open." It's like, it happened again, and it happened again.
Right.
You know, people look for things to be, you know, to come up with one explanation for everything.
And we shouldn't underestimate the propensities of the human psyche to create and imprint. And I'm just not saying imagine. I mean, to make something like a haunting can be synthesized, can be made. And expanding that, I used to be a Bigfoot hunter, Bigfoot researcher. And that was a fascinating time. I did that for 4 years. And people say, was that thing real? Was it real? And I say, yes, absolutely. It was real then. I don't know if it's real now, but it was real then. And I don't think people quite grasp what I mean. I don't mean it migrated away. I mean, it had a physical or a quasi-physical reality to it, then enough to leave footprints, enough to bend branches, enough for us to hear it. But and some people saw it was real then.
Right. That's an interesting perspective.
Real then, yes.
Yeah, you don't consider it. Well, maybe it's just not an entity we think it is. You know, people think like, oh, it's this big creature in the woods. That's the living, breathing creature that's there, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else, you know? So, you know, it's all very like oddly subjective, or, you know, it's interesting. So I think a lot of it has to do with perspective.
Yeah. Perspective and memory. I mean, we don't really remember things. We remember a little bit here and there, and our minds put it back together as in we did remember it. Yes. Right. Somebody else who was there. You know, as time goes along, it gets worse and worse how the stories differ.
Right. You know? Like the telephone game.
Sure, I'm telling you. No, it wasn't. You know,
well, I was playing telephone. It was a fascinating study. It's fun to even speculate about that. Well, it's like that song by Peter, Paul, and Mary. You wouldn't remember it. Puff the Magic Dragon.
It was about drugs.
That's what they say, but it wasn't about drugs. It was just what I saw them perform. And Paul said, you know, he's like warming up. He said, and this song means absolutely nothing but what it says it is. You know, no, it could be, but you know. Well, then again, who was the boy who came to see Puff the Magic Dragon? Jackie Paper.
Yeah.
Then one day it happened. Jackie Paper came no more. But the whole thing is about the dragon is real while he's believed in, you know. And then he goes, a dragon lives forever, but not so little boys. The whole thing is about, I know, I'm going to rabbit trailing. Puff the Magic Dragon is real when Jackie comes to see him, and then Jackie stops coming, and he's not real anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's
ghosties.
And a lot of times, you know, somebody says something happens, and we're looking for replication. We're looking for it to do it again, and we're all, you know, we're going to be there at the same bat time, same bat channel. Yeah. We're going to wait for it to happen again. In real life, how many things actually happen the same way at the same time in the same place? They don't.
Right.
So when that once happened, you know, whether or not it happens that way and in that place again, really can't be too much of a factor. Unless you're talking about a haunting where something's, playing over and over. That's a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm.
But because something doesn't happen again doesn't mean it didn't happen the first time.
Right.
But then you're running into memory and,
memory is fallible. Memory is adaptive.
When you consider that, it's kind of been proven that people who believe in the supernatural or the paranormal tend to have more supernatural or paranormal experiences. What does that mean? We really don't know. It does seem to follow that pattern. Does it mean they're more fallible, like some people would say? Does it mean they attract these things? You can come up with a million different explanations for something that's kind of a fact.
Right.
So it's hard to differentiate. And that's why we're still looking into all these things. That's why it's still fun. If we had an answer, we would just be, that's the answer.
Right. That'd be it, right? It's the exploration of the answer, and it's the exploration of the answer.
I'd be rather willing. This is actually a freaky character. If you ever see me perform this, the Birdman does things that really a person shouldn't be able to do, and I don't know how I do them sometimes. It's all.
Do you levitate?
I fall. Actually, I have done I have done strange things. I kind of like almost floated when I've jumped off a ledge, float down. Strange things happen. So I would be willing to actually, during your tour, just run across Benefit Street, just run down the hill, and nobody. But then I missed the tour.
Right, you would miss the tour. You might have the guests a little distracted, but it could add. Maybe that could be the October 31st tour. We have this ominous raven.
It wouldn't be much fun for me, because then I just dash across the street, and it's like, okay, what do I do now? Go to my car,
Yeah, right. I'm sure your performances at Waterfire are a little bit more encapsulating.
Yes, they are. The strange things happen. Yeah, you'll have to come and see one, please.
Yeah, we got to keep our eyes out for the Birdman.
Oh, I've had people come there and not find the Birdman. Oh, why weren't you there? But the Birdman was there. He was invisible. I told you it's dark.
Character,
yeah. Yeah. Well, I won't give away my performance.
Yeah, right. It's one of those things you got to keep people guessing and wondering.
It's fun when you
part
watch
of the mysticism.
Yeah. Okay. What else can we ask this man before? What time? Can I just? Oh my word! Where does this go? Because
we're almost there. There is one anecdote that I didn't share. That's kind of funny. So this seance in particular happened at the home on Benefit Street, the red house that we know and associate with Whitman often. Apparently, her and a group of friends, a very small group of friends, decided to have a seance. And so as they were setting up and about to conduct this communication with the dead, they claim a charcoal black cat just appeared out of nowhere. And so the group of friends and Whitman were all kind of enamored by this cat, and they started chasing it around to try to catch it because they wanted to pet it and give it attention. And so as they're chasing it around, he had jumped into a fireplace, potentially lit fireplace, and then disappeared up the chimney, and they never saw him again. So you have to wonder, was this an apparition? Or was this just a stray cat that found itself in the house and was just so startled by these women chasing it around?
Maybe it just immolated and went through.
Right. We just
very fast.
Yeah, we just don't know. So it's those types of things where she's almost kind of spoofing on herself a little bit. She's not taking herself too seriously, but she's leaving people wondering, like, I wonder if that was a ghost cat or something, or if it was just a stray cat. She doesn't confirm or deny. She just tells the story and leaves it up to us to ponder. And so I think that's her tactic in kind of maintaining that neutrality in these movements, especially spiritualism.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
that's spectral evidence. That's a witch is familiar. I said something strange.
She's a witch.
Yeah, you leave people guessing.
Could
well,
be.
I'd ask what's next for you, but I pretty much know what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's just about.
If one wants to take the tour, what do? They just contact you, and so you
Yeah,
can
they can jump on the site. They can schedule a private tour if the dates don't work out for them. But the Eventbrite link is right on the homepage when you log in. So just follow the Eventbrite link, and it'll take you right to the ticket menu, and you can see all the dates and reserve your spot.
Do it nice and easy.
Yeah. Do you ever get guests dressing up like suggestive of Victorian attire?
I've had a few guests, not in full Victorian garb, but lacy types of blouses that are Victorian-esque with pendants of Poe and ravens. And I've gotten some people kind of dress up a little bit for the tours. But at the same time, you got to be a little comfortable because it's like a 2-ish hour tour and it's about a mile and a half. And we're kind of going up and down a couple little hills, not anything major, but it can be a little strenuous. So, you want to look great, but you also want to be comfortable.
Yeah. So don't wear the little pointy shoes.
Yeah, definitely not. Don't do that. And no tight corsets that you're going to pass out in.
Oh, the vapors. Yeah. Are your tours always daytime? It'd probably see more and safer, but do you ever?
Yeah, I generally give them during the daylight hours, but I've done a few nighttime tours, private tours, and it just so happened that that's when the people were available. They were either in from out of town and they were available later on, and that's when we did the tour. But I mostly do them during the day just for, as you said, safety reasons. As Benefit Street especially, the sidewalks are all up and down and bricks are up and out and roots are growing under. It's kind of, I've had people trip, so I don't want to add to the obstacle by doing it in the dark, but it is fun in the dark. So anyone that might request a private tour can definitely select a nighttime option if they're so willing. It might add a different layer of I don't know, interest to the tour because Poe actually first spotted Whitman at night in her rose garden, so you could kind of get that exact aesthetic, for the actual history,
the actual place.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So yeah.
Wow.
So do you prefer a cognac or absinthe? if you were to be gifted.
No, the cognac, it's a nice ode to the Poe toaster. The absinthe, I mean, it's supposed to make you tripped out, right? I don't know. So maybe the absinthe.
Yeah. Is an ingredient.
Maybe I can escape for a bit with the absinthe and
like a whole little ceremony to drink it and everything.
Yeah, right. And then we can go to our own different worlds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Is the tour growing, expanding? I mean, it's basically the script that we heard.
And, yes, essentially. The sites kind of remain the same. The script is actually a little different from the one you heard. I added some information about Poe's death at the end because I thought that was kind of a conversation worth having because I almost get on every tour, people ask me, how did Poe die? And of course, I start from the beginning. Obviously we don't know how he died, so it's a whole explanation. So instead, I just added a bit in about his death towards the end of the tour. I added some different excerpts from letters and poetry that they apply to the whole story, but before I thought, it might be too much, so I didn't include it. But as I've been working the tour and doing the tour, you kind of figure out what's working and what's not, and what you can add, what you should take away. And so as I do the tours and I get that feedback and I see how different parts affected the audience, I kind of play around with different ideas. So you can almost guarantee a little something different. And as Elise was saying, the tour kind of gets dictated by the crowd because, as you were saying, people ask different questions on different tours. There's different energy of different people on the tours that create different conversations that, you can join in on or just listen to, and you gain more information that way on different topics. And it's cool. I've yet to be stumped by a question on a tour. I pretty much have an answer to some degree. I've learned when you are kind of stumped on a question, you answer something that relates to it that you do have an answer for. But for the most part, I've pretty much heard it all, read it all, seen it all, so I can answer pretty much anything to a degree. But I didn't know who the hazard guy was. Which is interesting. I should look him up.
I had in the back of my mind, I couldn't remember his name. Then I finally did. Now I'm thinking, maybe we'll look at his things and see if her name pops up.
Well, yeah, because they were contemporaries, of whether they'd corresponded, whether they'd spoken, would be fascinating.
They
to
were
find
around
out.
the same ages also, which,
both in Rhode Island, and
I wouldn't doubt they had communication at some point. I mean, she was friends with everybody.
Yeah, with him being so close. Yeah, I read about him a little bit. It's one of those, put it over there. Oh, I'd love to read. No, better stick to what I'm doing right now. How that happens.
It's easy to go. Yeah, it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole, and you want to stay. You find yourself branching off too far from that like initial topic that you're researching or trying to write about, or so. Yeah, sometimes you got to say, nope, I'm going to just leave that alone for a second and focus.
Yeah, well, I thought of a little innovation. I would never impose on your tour, but I thought of something.
Yeah, you have to stream.
People will just see something they didn't expect. Nothing distracting.
Regan's going to come flopping
by. That takes a lot of energy. Like I said, no, but that's a one-trick thing. I ruin it for myself that way. Freaky guy buying a costume, but no, it's something else, a little more creative. Not Reynolds was here or anything.
Yeah, right. Well, if you're doing ghostly things on Benefit Street, you're gonna really convince people that there are ghosts haunting Providence on this tour. It's going to become a ghost tour, and I don't want to. I don't want to be in competition with the Providence ghost tour, right?
Yeah, you get a ghost tour going.
Yeah.
Someone asked me too. They're like, "Oh, or they suggested, oh, you should dress up in a period attire and carry a lantern and stuff." I'm like, the ghost tour is doing that, and this is not what this is. This is like a theatrical thing, and that they're their own thing. They tell their own
story. Take that one tomorrow night.
Right. This is different, and I'm not trying to, copy anybody's ideas, or this is a whole different thing. And so,
plenty to talk about in the city.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Providence is loaded with history and just so many fascinating things, and the buildings and just the people. It's crazy. So you can just go on and on. You can make a tour for just about anything in Providence.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we did find that you were alive and active in the 1800s, because I found that impressionist painting of you.
Oh, that's right.
I have a Renoir of me where it's like, by gum, that is me in that picture.
It's so fascinating. It's like everyone has like their twin, right? They say. So you got to think over time, how many people have looked very similar in odd ways, and
combinations of this can there be,
Right, exactly.
You run out of variables, God ran out of faces at a certain point.
Yeah, honestly,
the alchemy is replicated, so it's uncanny sometimes. I mean, there's the when you look, oh yeah, you do kind of look like the guy in the port. There's another thing where I've had with me, where it's like, that's you in that picture, that's you now, and I just happen to have the same hairstyle when I saw the picture and a mustache then. So when I found you, you were wearing a scarf. You were kind of a Lascar, but it was your hair and your face.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. I thought that was interesting when you brought that to my attention. It definitely piqued my curiosity. I'm like, this is pretty neat. Find yourself an old timey painting, and it's something. It's surreal.
And that was before all this AI stuff. So it wasn't just us putting your face on a picture.
Right, exactly. This was actually painted by a real person, and a real person sat for the painting.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that in a future episode. Well, we thank you so much. We don't even have to stop. No, we should. I love talking. He's got
things to do. He's got school tomorrow.
Yeah. Right and early.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I have a feeling you'll be our guest again. You're always welcome to.
Thank you. I'll be back anytime. You'll have me. This is great.
Just resumed, and this will be a nice time to talk about that.
Yes, I encourage everybody to take the tour.
I mean, it really is a good experience if you're into this.
Take a friend that doesn't know about Poe, and
that's gold when you have somebody who's just learning about Poe.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Levi.
Thank you, Elise.
Soon, I gotta still have to go clean Susan's gravestone, but.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just looks kind of dull next to Sarah's.
Right, she's literally now outshining Susan.
Because Elise worked her magic craft on that and used her chemical and her experience, and really revitalized the Sarah Helen Whitman
Yeah,
stuff,
let's
which
look it
Sarah
up.
Helen Whitman never requested or put in her will. She didn't want any marker.
True.
But now, you spruce that up.
Yeah, all right.
And now the other one, you can see the
They-
contrast to Susan's.
Yes. Well, have a very good night, and thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
This was
Talk to
great.
you soon.
I appreciate it.
Good night now.
It's just.